In 2025, the world's billionaires got $2.5 trillion richer in a single year. That is the entire economy of France added to roughly 3,000 people. While you were stuck in traffic, paying off your credit card, and wondering why your grocery bill felt heavier than it did 2 years ago. And the truly infuriating part? The system that made this happen was not built by accident. It was engineered carefully, over decades, by the same people who benefited from it. Welcome to the most politely legal heist in human history. Let us start with the number. In 2025, according to Oxfam, global billionaire wealth grew by over 16%, roughly 3 times faster than the average person's wealth grew in the same period. The total crossed $18.3 trillion. To give you a sense of scale, that is more than the combined GDP of the United States and Germany, held by fewer people than can fill a mid-sized sports stadium. Now, here is the part that should make you put down your coffee. That gap between how fast the very top grows and how fast everyone else grows did not appear because billionaires worked 3 times harder in 2025. It appeared because they were playing a completely different game with completely different rules on a board that they helped design. And once you understand the game, you cannot unsee it. Let us talk about how wealth at the very top actually works, because most people assume billionaires get rich the same way everyone else does. They earn money, they save it, they invest it, and it grows over time. That is technically true, but the order of operations is so different that it might as well be a different language. Here's the standard model for most working people. You earn a salary, the government takes a portion of it before it even arrives in your account. This is called income tax, and depending on where you live, it can run anywhere from 20 to 45%. You live on what remains. If you have anything left at the end of the month, you put it somewhere and hope it grows faster than inflation. This is called being financially responsible, and it is genuinely difficult. Here's how it works at the billionaire level. You do not earn a salary, or if you do, you pay yourself something comically small. Elon Musk pays himself $1 a year from Tesla. What you actually have is ownership. You own enormous amounts of stock in companies you founded or control. Those stocks go up in value. But here's the beautiful, infuriating trick. Rising stock value is not income, not legally, and if it's not income, it's not taxed as income. So you are sitting on, say, $50 billion of stock that has gained $20 billion in value this year. You owe 0 tax on that $20 billion because you have not sold anything. The gain exists on paper. It exists in your net worth. Journalists write about it in headlines, and the Forbes list updates accordingly. But to the IRS, it does not exist yet. This is called an unrealized gain, and it is the foundation of the entire billionaire playbook. Now, here is where it gets almost comedic. You need cash. Maybe you want to buy a yacht, or fund a rocket company, or simply pay for a home. You could sell some stock, but then you would owe capital gains tax. So instead, you do something brilliant and completely legal. You go to a bank. You say, "Here is my $50 billion of stock as collateral. Give me a loan." The bank, thrilled to have you as a client, hands you several $100 million at a very low interest rate. You use that cash to live on. The interest on the loan is often tax-deductible. And your stock? Still appreciating, still untaxed. You have effectively converted your wealth into spendable cash without ever triggering a tax event. This strategy even has a name in financial circles. It is called buy, borrow, die. You buy assets, you borrow against them to live, and when you die, your heirs receive those assets at their current value, and the original gain that accumulated over your lifetime is permanently erased from the tax record. It is called the stepped-up basis, and it means that decades of wealth accumulation can pass from one generation to the next without a penny of the underlying gain ever being taxed. Not deferred, gone. Now, layer on top of this the events of 2025, because 2025 was not a normal year for asset prices. It was the year artificial intelligence stopped being a concept and started being a gold rush. NVIDIA's stock price, already extraordinary, climbed to make it the world's first $4 trillion company. The companies at the top of the AI economy, a handful of technology corporations and their founders, saw their valuations explode at a pace that had no historical precedent. And who held the most stock in those companies? The people who founded them. The people who have been accumulating equity for decades. The same people who had already structured their finances to ensure that stock appreciation flows to them tax efficiently, borrowable, and inheritable without penalty. Jensen Huang of NVIDIA saw his net worth increase by tens of billions in a single year. Mark Zuckerberg of Meta, whose AI investments began paying off dramatically in 2024 and 2025, added billions to his already enormous fortune. This was not because they worked harder than a school teacher or a nurse or a software developer who also happens to own a few shares of a tech ETF. It was because they owned the right assets at the right moment in history, and the tax structure ensured that the gains flowed to them in the most efficient possible way. But the game does not end at the tax code, because the third layer, and this is the one that closes the loop completely, is political. In 2025, Oxfam reported something that sounds like satire, but is documented and sourced. Billionaires are now approximately 4,000 times more likely to hold political office than the average person. The same year that billionaire wealth grew at 3 times the rate of everyone else's, the political class overseeing the rules of the economy looked increasingly like a club whose members had a financial interest in keeping those rules exactly as they are. Tax reform proposals that would tax unrealized gains, that would close the buy, borrow, die loop, have surfaced repeatedly in American political discourse and been defeated repeatedly. The people most affected by those proposals are also among the most significant donors to the campaigns of people who vote on those proposals. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented feedback loop. Capital buys influence, influence protects capital, capital grows. Repeat. So now you understand the architecture, and you understand why 2025 was not a fluke. It was the logical outcome of a system running exactly as designed. Here is what this story actually teaches you. The first lesson is that income is the least efficient form of wealth creation. Every dollar you earn as a salary or wage is taxed before you can deploy it. Every dollar that comes to you as appreciation in an asset you already own is taxed only when you choose to realize it, if ever. The billionaire's fundamental advantage is not intelligence or work ethic. It is that they figured out, very early, that owning things is structurally more efficient than earning things. The second lesson is that leverage used on appreciating assets is one of the most powerful financial tools on the planet, and most people only ever use debt to buy depreciating ones. A mortgage on a house that goes up in value is fundamentally different from a car loan on a vehicle that loses value the moment you drive it off the lot. And a loan secured against a portfolio of growing stocks is structurally different again. The question is not whether to use debt. The question is what the debt is secured against and whether that underlying asset is going up or down. The third lesson is that the tax code is not neutral. It was written by human beings, influenced by interests, and adjusted over time by people with skin in the game. Understanding which types of income and gains are taxed at what rates, and structuring your financial life accordingly is not cheating, it is literacy. The people who benefit most from the current system are not breaking rules. They are reading them more carefully than everyone else. The fourth lesson is that in a winner-takes-all economy, the gap between being adjacent to the right industry at the right moment and being far away from it can define decades of financial outcomes. The AI boom of 2024 and 2025 did not lift all boats equally. It lifted the boats that were already in the harbor. If you were holding equity in technology, in semiconductors, in infrastructure companies serving the AI transition, your portfolio grew in ways that bore no relation to your work output. If you were not, you watched from the outside. So what do you do with all of this? Because knowing the game and playing the game are two different things, and most of the strategies at the very top of the wealth ladder are not accessible at your income level. Yet. But the principles are. Start with this. The moment you have any discretionary income at all, the most important decision you make is not what to spend it on. It is whether you deploy it as labor income, keeping it in cash, spending it on consumption, or whether you convert it into ownership. Even modest equity in appreciating assets, an index fund, a small real estate position, equity in a company, even equity compensation at your employer, begins to work the way assets work at the top. It appreciates without being taxed until you sell. It can be borrowed against. It compounds. Second, understand your effective tax rate versus your marginal rate. Your marginal rate is the rate applied to your next dollar of income. Your effective rate is what you actually pay across all your income. Between retirement accounts, capital gains treatment on investments held longer than a year, and the difference between ordinary income and qualified dividends, there is more room for ordinary people to optimize their tax exposure than most people realize, because most people were never taught to look. Third, in a world where AI and technology are compressing value into fewer and fewer companies and individuals, the most dangerous financial position is to have zero exposure to the asset class that is doing the compressing. You do not need to pick the next NVIDIA. You need to own a small piece of the category. An S&P 500 index fund or a technology-weighted ETF means that when the next AI wave creates the next $4 trillion company, you are along for some fraction of the ride instead of watching from the outside. The gap between billionaire wealth and everyone else did not grow by $2.5 trillion in 2025 because 3,000 people were smarter or faster or more deserving than 8 billion others. It grew because those 3,000 people owned the right assets, structured their gains correctly, borrowed against appreciation instead of selling it, and operated in a political environment that kept the rules favorable. The system was not broken. It was working exactly as designed. And now you know how it works. In 2025, the world's billionaires got $2.5 trillion richer while you were stuck in traffic, paying off your credit card, and wondering why your grocery bill felt heavier. The answer was never that they worked harder. It was that they owned more. And the best time to start owning is always right now.